Why play Golden Ox? Well, you might be trying to play towards a very high tempo comp, something you can push levels and punish the lobby or play very aggressively. You're looking for many win out conditions. Golden Ox actually has a really high win rate potential, especially if you reach the necessary conditions and the higher thresholds of Golden Ox. And there's also multiple win out conditions, so it actually gives you a really good chance of playing for first if you're somebody who likes to get that absolute peak moment of getting a first in TFT. Additionally, it's also a relatively fun trait if you're looking for a trait with cash outs, something that scales, lots of drops, components, gold, etc. This is an experience that might be different from some of the other comps in the game. It also scales and questions whether or not you roll or push levels and have actions in a particular turn. It's a unique experience, at least in the set of TFT set 14, so it's something that you might be looking for just to have a little bit of a mix up and have some fun with it. However, this comp can be risky, very risky. There are some conditions where you win out for sure, and it's very easy to get a first if you have a good spot for Golden Ox, but playing it in some other spots is really bad in certain situations, and you can often easily go 8th or even bot 4. It's very, very risky. Additionally, it often needs a spatula and a strong opener. These are the conditions that really make it viable as a win out comp where you don't have to worry too much about losing out and just going 8th. But additionally, you can also fall behind very fast if you low roll. If you're in a spot where you're playing Golden Ox and your spot isn't amazing from your opener really early on in the game, if you're kind of hoping that it will eventually fix itself later on, sometimes it doesn't, and then you're really far behind and you can often find yourself in a bad spot. Now, please make sure to like and subscribe because it does help me out as a smaller TFT content creator. On my channel, I do daily guides. There's many different things, like there's some older guides where I talk about specific facets of the game. A lot of them on set 14 right now are more of the how to play guides because we're still early on the set. There's also some for fun content that I do sometimes, like some tier lists and stuff like that, just to be like, you know, a little bit more of like the standard TFT YouTuber. Either way, if you want to try and learn as much as you can about set 14, this would be a great channel for you. And if you're a returning viewer from watching some of my other videos, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button because it does help me out quite a bit. But anyways, let's go back into the topic at hand. What is Golden Ox? So Golden Ox has a lot of moving parts to it actually. So I'll try and break it down. But basically, Golden Ox, in a nutshell, you get damage amp, and if you roll, you increase the amount of damage amp that your units have, or level up. If you spend gold on leveling or EXP, or if you spend it on rolling, you get extra damage amp. So the exact breakdown, the way that it works is that Golden Ox, you gain damage amp if you spend a certain amount of gold in a particular round. So it does not carry over. You spend gold in one round, you don't reach the threshold that is defined by the trait, then you will not get the damage amp. And you have to do it before the combat starts, if I believe. I'm not sure if they're fixing that in the next patch. I remember reading something along the lines of that. But either way, if you spend a certain amount of gold, there's like a little tree on the side. I actually prepared a video that I'm going to have later. So if you look at this video, this is what I'm talking about, this tree. So for example, if I spend 8 gold on rerolls or EXP in a round, then I will get a damage amp increase. And then this denominator, this 8, will increase over time. Like every time you hit it, it'll be like a next cash out that you have to reach. So you're going to be progressively spending more and more gold to get more and more damage amp that scales your comp into late game. So this is a scaling comp. In addition to scaling the comp, like giving you damage amp, Golden Ox units also on kill have a chance of dropping loot. So in this case, for example, there's 2, 4, and 6 Golden Ox. As you can see, you have damage amp, which is your base starting damage amp. Then you have a 20% chance of dropping gold on a kill. 4 has a 60% chance, and then 6 has a 100% chance of loot. So you're always going to get at least 1 gold when you kill a unit, but then there's also a 7% chance that you're going to get a component. And this is where Golden Ox has huge win out potentials, because farming components is extremely powerful in TFT. It can put you in an insanely good spot because having items on units makes them exponentially better or multiplicatively better, which is insane. Another thing that I didn't say, which I'm sure people will correct me on, but I'm just going to say it now, rerolls count towards double the gold spent. In this video, we're not going to be talking too much about reroll options because a lot of times the Golden Ox reroll options actually don't really lean too heavily into Golden Ox. But however, if you want to get these damage amp thresholds more efficiently, rerolls count towards double. So like 2 gold on a reroll will count towards 4 on the little money tree thing that is on the side of the screen that counts up your damage amp. So just keep that in mind. It's a little bit more efficient if you're trying to ramp up and scale the comp to roll instead of use XP. Of the Golden Ox unit, there are 6 of the units: a 1 cost, a 2 cost, a 3 cost, 2 4 costs, and a 5 cost, which is Viego, which is your chase unit typically. So, when should you be playing Golden Ox? In my opinion, now, this is going to be where it's a little bit divisive. I'm sure people have different opinions, but I like to present to you the best case scenarios often, and I try and give you guys the best chance of success because I care about people's success on the channel, not just baiting for views and stuff like that. I would say not to play Golden Ox unless you have a Golden Ox emblem. I think Golden Ox emblem is very important towards the stability and is very important in order to reach those conditions where you actually can win out. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but I would not really angle towards Golden Ox unless I already have an emblem, or there's a high likelihood that I will get an emblem, like something like Loot Sub, where I know for sure like I might get an emblem a little bit later. Things like that matter a lot more to me. You could play it without an emblem, right? If you look at Golden Ox, the reason an emblem is really important is because it helps you to hit 6 Golden Ox really efficiently, and 6 Golden Ox is like your win condition. That's the juicy thing that you want to hit. You could hit 6 Golden Ox with just the Golden Ox units. There are 6 of them, so you don't technically need an emblem, but for stability's sake, I think emblem is really important. And then I kind of spoiled it, but with items, flexible items are actually really good here. You have AP carries, you have melee carries, you have tanks, you have AD carries, so your items can be really flexible. What I would recommend is usually angling to have at least a Gwinsu and a blue buff. Blue buff is really good on Annie, which is one of the 4 cost carries that you stabilize around, and Gwinsu is really good on Aphelios, who is the other 4 cost carry that you stabilize around. AD items can also work really well because typically the Golden Ox board fits a little nicer into AD. Now you might be asking yourself, why? Why does it fit into AD? There's AP and AD units. It's mostly just the early game units, right? Graves is an AD unit, Jarvan does AD damage primarily, and then Aphelios also does AD, so it's a little bit easier of a transition if you're playing around AD, but like I said, you can play it from an AP start and then go towards Annie Viego. It's just a little bit more awkward in your mid game into your late game. Let's talk about some final boards. Before we talk about the exact final boards, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to introduce the unit, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the trait to try and explain to you why 6 Golden Ox, in my opinion, is really, really important to hit, and it's really important to hit early. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the actual units. So Alistar has a flat damage reduction, which is really powerful. So Alistar is actually one of the best early game units. He's one of the best 1 cost tanks. If you're not playing around Alistar, a lot of times you can streak pretty easily on stage 2 if you have a 2-star Alistar with some items. So Alistar is really great. Currently in the meta, Jarvan is broken. He's getting nerfed as of the patch that's going to come out tomorrow. So if you're watching this, this is still on 14.2 patch. 14.3 patch is going to be out tomorrow. But either way, Jarvan's just a really reliable tank in the current landscape of the game, and could also do a lot of damage in a lot of cases. Graves right now is in a little bit of an awkward spot, but Graves is a good item holder and has a 0 mana ability, so that means that he just attacks off of like attack speed and stuff like that, which is actually pretty nice to manage some items in your early game. Now in terms of your chase units and playing around these, also he has AoE. AoE is really good, so he can spread effects, like if you give him like a Last Whisper or something like that. Now let's look at the units. Viego, absolutely broken. He's getting nerfed. Hopefully he's still going to be really strong, but he's one of like the best 5 costs in the game. Summons an extra unit, jumps into the back line, does a bunch of shredding built in. He basically does everything. He's amazing. Enough said. Annie, a little bit awkward, got really nerfed and been trying to find her way into the meta recently. She's getting buffed next patch, so it might actually be really reliable in terms of doing damage with amp boards in particular. But when we're talking about Golden Ox, you're usually not playing towards the amp lines. She's really good at just like stalling out. She does like a little bit of everything. She does damage, as well as summoning extra front line, as well as just like scaling up within the fight kind of nicely. So she actually works out really well. And then Aphelios, Resident Gwinsu holder, usually the carry when you're thinking about Golden Ox, just like attacks really fast, marksman, scales up AD really well. Golden Ox gives damage amp, so he basically just has a lot of extra stats in order to take those base AD numbers and crank out damage. When you think about the final board that you want to play with Golden Ox, a lot of times you're playing around 6 Golden Ox. Now, there are other variations when you can play 2 Golden Ox and 4 Golden Ox. 2 Golden Ox is usually just like a splash trait. You're usually playing something else. This is a line where you're usually playing towards level 8, and I'll explain why in a second. But there are reroll variations. Obviously, you can reroll Jarvan and Slayers. You can reroll like certain lines with Techie as well, and you can play Techie with Viego and other lines. Those aren't the boards we're going to talk about today, because we're talking specifically around playing Golden Ox. Those other lines, usually you're just putting Golden Ox as a splash trait, and you're not playing deep into the Golden Ox trait. Let's introduce the Golden Ox trait in terms of stats, and this is going to structure a little bit how I break down this video and I talk about it. But basically, if you look at Golden Ox, you can actually look at the average placement and then the percentages of those average placement across all the games that have been played in the most recent patch. Golden Ox is really awkward because 2 Golden Ox, you can see it's kind of like a pretty even distribution. It's kind of good, kind of whatever. 2 Golden Ox is usually just a splash trait. You're either already playing a unit like a Jarvan or a Viego, and you're just putting in Golden Ox to support that unit to reach a higher cap. That's usually where 2 Golden Ox comes from. 4 Golden Ox, we'll go to this one. Now, 4 Golden Ox is the one where you can normally hit it if you're trying to play around Golden Ox. If you look at it, look at the distribution of the placements. It is horrendous. It is absolutely jaw-droppingly awful. You have the highest likelihood, if you're just like taking the stats as like average placements across all the games that people have played, good spots, bad spots, anything, most people go bot 4 and most people actually go 8th. It's the highest likelihood. Now obviously whenever you're playing 4 Golden Ox, you're usually in between boards. It's usually like a low roll spot where you're trying to play around 6 Golden Ox and you haven't made it there yet. There's no reasons why the numbers here are a little bit skewed, of course, but I'm just trying to say it's a very hard comp to kind of make work at the 4 level. However, if you look at the 6 level, this is where things get a little bit interesting. You can see that the distribution of the stats, there's actually still a really high likelihood of going 8th. If you look at the average placements, they're actually really skewed towards negative, except you have a really insanely high likelihood of just winning out and going first. 6 Golden Ox is key. It's very 1st or 8th, but it's actually extremely powerful, especially if you play it from a good spot. This is one of the highest win percentages, like, of most comps, like, ever. Like, it is a insane, like, above 20%. Like, usually if you have like a 15% win rate, you're like, holy crap, that's a really strong comp. A 23% win rate across all the games played, assuming good spots, bad spots, all the spots, whatever. Of course, hitting 6 Golden Ox is harder to hit than some of the other things, so it is obviously going to be skewed. But something to note is that if you're not going first, a lot of times you're still high likelihood to go in that bot 4. So it's kind of like it's like you have to reach the point where you reach the win out potential with the comp. And that's where these things become key. So when you think about 6 Golden Ox, this is the board that I would recommend usually. Something along these lines. Obviously, you can replace the 5 cost with lower cost units until you hit the 5 costs. But in this case, what we're playing is Golden Ox, Anima Squad, Marksman, and Aphelios is your primary carry. I feel like Annie as a solo carry is a little bit hard to work with. But basically, when you're playing around this board, you're trying to itemize basically everyone. You want to hit 6 Golden Ox as early as possible. You want to be 6 Golden Ox on stage 4. So if you look at this board, this is a level 8 board. Of course, I have Viego and Aurora. If it makes you feel better, swap Viego for Graves because he will be on your board until you find the Viego, right? You want to be 6 Golden Ox on stage 4 because you want to start farming the components. That is key. This comp is very weak unless you have full items on everybody, basically. It's a very sum of its parts kind of board. Aphelios can carry you a lot in your mid game, but you'll fall off really hard if you don't have good Annie items and you don't have good Xayah items as well. And then additionally, you usually want to have frontline items as well. Because we're playing around Marksman, we're just taking the high cost Marksman, which is Xayah, because she's going to pump out good damage. And you can also get Anima Squad in pretty easily because Leona synergizes as a Vanguard for your frontline as well. In terms of the actual items you want, usually Aphelios you want Guinsoo. It just works really well with this kit. He's primarily an auto attacker. The other 2 items, in my opinion, are quite flexible. A lot of people like to go Gunblade Guinsoo, something like this. It works out really well because he just ramps up really fast with the double Guinsoo, and Gunblade helps to stall the comp really effectively by just healing up everybody. It synergizes really well with Annie, who wants to kind of stall out longer and summon as many Tibbers as possible. It gives Xayah time to cast, and it also can work really well with Aurora or whatever other 5 cost you slot in. I don't think it's worth griefing your game over, however. I think that this requires like 3 rods, 2 bows, and a sword. It's a little bit awkward to build around. I think if you have 1 Guinsoo, your items are actually kind of flexible. You can go into crit. I don't think crit is particularly great on him. Usually you'll move these items over to a Xayah later because Xayah is good at doing like explosive burst damage like that. But even like, you know, an additional source of damage amp like Giant Slayer can work out really well. Other items can work out really well as well, like a Runans in some cases is okay. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good, but what I would say is just be flexible and just make items that make sense. Personally, like, I think Deathblade is extremely strong on him if you're that high roll that you have double sword. Where's Deathblade? Deathblade, right? That's like one of his better items that you can put on. Something like this is insanely strong just because Deathblade just gives him so much base AD that he can just work with in addition to the marksman stuff. I've had success playing Aphelios with like IE Guard Breaker, which isn't a very popular build, of course, because usually you put these items on Xayah. But what I'm trying to say is just make items that make sense. Either build towards full crit, build towards full damage amp, build towards like some other items. Another really good set of items on him is red buff if you have an insane amount of bows, because he spreads it, he hits multiple units, and additionally it gives him good starting attack speed to ramp up the Guinsoo a little bit faster. For sake of example here, I'm just going to put the Gunblade Guinsoos because I think that's like one of the better builds. It's a little bit more reliable and consistent. But I just want you guys to know you have some options. Xayah, however, usually you need a Golden Ox emblem. So with this board, I'm assuming you have a Golden Ox emblem. If you don't have a Golden Ox emblem, then you're probably not going to top 4. It's very hard to make this board stabilize if you don't have 6 Golden Ox, because 6 Golden Ox not only gives you a huge amount of extra damage, it also gives that damage amp onto Xayah, who is a marksman, which you can then make her into like a really strong targeting, like deleting unit, right? Basically what you want with her is like full crit. A lot of times, like just for sake of utility, it's IE and like a Last Whisper, but Last Whisper isn't really a damage item. It's more just to like apply the sundering effect really efficiently. You can also go for like Guard Breaker. I would recommend 2 glove items, make her crit and just absolutely delete, because now she's gonna have a lot of AD from marksman, she's gonna have a lot of crit chance from Infinity Edge, and her ability is gonna crit, and you have a high likelihood of critting because of the double crit items. And then additionally, Golden Ox is going to give you a shit ton of damage amp. So what do you have? You have max crit, max damage amp, max AD from her marksman trait. This unit will absolutely just delete anybody in existence. It's amazing. So this is usually how you build her. If you really need to, you can put a Shojin on her. I'm not a big Shojin believer. I think that you're better off just building more towards damage than trying to get the faster cast off. But to each their own, you can do that as well. Annie, you usually want to have blue buff. She has a very low mana threshold, so blue buff is going to help her to cast really frequently. A lot of times, like the best Annie, quote unquote, that used to be the go-to Annie build was blue buff Nashor Shojin. You just want her to cast as many times as possible to make as many Tibbers as possible. However, if you're playing a comp like this where you have like decent enough frontline and you're stalling out for much of the fight, I wouldn't recommend the Shojin. I think it's better just to use those items otherwise. I actually really like something like Archangels. It just scales her really well into the fight and makes her have like long-lasting threat, and she can delete units at the end of the game, at the end of the round if really needed. Or you can just build her towards some more damage items as well. Blue buff I think is essential though. If you just have Shojin on Annie, it's a little bit awkward to get her to cast in time. Now let's talk about Viego. Viego, usually you're itemizing towards the end. Viego, really good item on him is usually Edge of Night. Edge of Night works really effectively because he just jumps into the backline and it can give him a lot of extra lives, like lease on life, that allows him to continue applying damage to backline units. So Edge of Night works really well, so he just doesn't jump in and just instantly die. If he's not dying, you don't really need to make Edge of Night, in my opinion. He's also really good with utility items. Almost everybody's good with utility items because everybody has AoE in this comp. This comp truly is a sum of its parts where everybody's kind of chipping away at everybody with each other. But a lot of times you'll see people put Morello on Viego. It just works really well. And he applies it to the backline very efficiently. You can also build him for full damage. Melee items are fine, but you can also build him for, like, you know, Hodge JG is a good item pairing on melee frontline users because they basically like double crit items. Same argument that I was making about Xayah, high likelihood of critting, and then his ult also crits. In terms of Leona, Leona's ability is really nice and also can increase the amount of damage that your Annie and your Tibbers are doing. So a lot of times I just like to have a mana item on her. When I say a mana item, it's usually a frontline item that's made with the tier. So a lot of times like a Protector's Vow is really good, but typically you're just putting as many tank items as you can muster. As you can see, every single unit has the potential to do a lot for this board. We haven't even talked about itemizing Aurora, itemizing other 5 costs. So having a lot of items actually scales this comp really well. It's a very hungry comp. If you have a lot of high cost units and you can bring out their full potential if you give them a lot of extra components or a lot of extra items to fully realize having significantly more damage, which is really powerful and really good. Now, how do you get all these components and how do you scale this comp really well? Well, part of it is rolling for Golden Ox. Rolling for Golden Ox isn't that big of a deal. I think some people get too caught up on rolling for Golden Ox. The thing about the rolls for Golden Ox is at one point, you're going to reach critical mass where it's going to be like over 50. Right? Like the amount of gold that you have to spend in a turn in order to get more damage amp. When you reach this point, you usually can't really scale Golden Ox up anymore. It's so a lot of people get really worried about that, and they like spend a lot of gold needlessly early. They spend a lot of gold just to try and ramp up Golden Ox. Like every single turn they're rolling for Golden Ox to make sure they maximize Golden Ox. The thing is, you're just speed running to a point where you won't be able to scale it anymore, right? Because there's a point where it's unsustainable, where you won't be able to spend like 20 or 30 gold every single round, and it's going to grief your econ way too much to a point where you're hurting your max cap anyways. So what I would say is that just play the game normally. When the opportune arises, like if you have excess gold, you can pump it into Golden Ox to make sure that you get your Golden Ox cash outs. But by the time you get to the end of the game, you're usually going to hit that critical mass threshold anyways. So don't worry too much about the Golden Ox number. I know it's fun, but it's more of like a distraction that kind of baits you into spending your gold in a way that's not very efficient. The thing that does matter a lot is hitting 6 Golden Ox. On stage 4, you want to be 6 Golden Ox because of these component scalings. That is one of the big win conditions for this comp. If you do not scale this comp with the extra loot that you're getting, either by pushing levels with the extra gold, getting your 5 costs online, or getting the extra loot like the components to itemize your units more effectively, you're gonna run into a brick wall. You're gonna bottom out. Your front line won't support your back line. You're gonna have a very difficult time ramping up all your units, and the sum of its parts is gonna be like a sum of nothing, because each unit without items is gonna properly commit to doing massive amounts of burst damage that's gonna be required for you to beat a lot of the other comps later. And that's why this comp, even with 6 Golden Ox, can bottom out very fast if you don't reach that point of critical mass. So what do I mean by that? Let's talk a little bit about your win conditions. So I'm going to show 2 win conditions here. The first one is going to be items. So this was a game I played. I tried to zoom in on it just to make it a little bit easier for the sake of this example. So I'm actually the player here. I'm the Zeri player. And this was a Golden Ox player in my board. If you look at their board, they're playing a very similar board to the one I showed you, except they just slotted in different 5 costs, which is pretty efficient. So they just have like an extra, I think one of them was, one of them's a Viego summon. I don't remember which one, or maybe not. I don't remember. But either way, they just slot in other units. Let's count the amount of items that I have, right? So these are completed items. In this game, I'm not going to count the one of my emblems. Or sorry, I'm not going to count, what's it called? The Orn artifacts and the Exotech items, because those were given to me via the game in this case. So I have 1 item, 2 item, 3 item, 4 item. I'm skipping this because it's Exotech. 5 item, 6 item. Skipping this. 7, 8, 9. I have 9 completed items, right? Some of them from Carousel. I got the emblem off Carousel. It was one of those wacky games. I have 9 completed items. This is a 6 Golden Ox player that had 6 Golden Ox on stage 4. This game lasted until around stage 6-2, so he had it in for a while. He had it for 2 complete stages. Let's count the components, or the items. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're skipping this. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Now, technically, the Golden Ox emblem was given to him via Augment, but I know for sure in this game, I took Big Grab Bag. So that's why I'm counting the 2 emblems, because basically I took an item augment and this guy took a spat augment with no other item augments. 19. He's up 10 whole items on me, which is the equivalent of 20 components. He's up 20 components. He or she, they, them. 20 components. Right? Now, it might not seem like much. You're like, oh, yeah, well, you know, of course, he has extra components. What does that mean? Evaluate this relative to augments in the game. 20 components, right? 3 components equals gold. And 6 components equals prismatic. He has 20. 20. He's up 3 prismatic augments on me. Do you know what do you see what I'm trying to say? It's a lot. Think about it. Imagine if you queued into a game and somebody was up, like you looked at their augments and you had 3 augments and they had 3 augments plus 3 more prismatic augments. It's absurd how many more components this person has. like maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, right? It's not a 1-to-1 ratio that I'm talking about, because a lot of it is like what items you're putting on what units, but the amount of resources that you get from 6 golden ox, if you have it in early, scales you to a point where nothing can compete with you, right? I have Renekton 2-star with like Exotech pulse stabilizers. This is some broken shit I cooked up. I have Aurora 2, she doesn't have 3 items, that's my bad. I have Zeri with Hollow Bow, which is like known to be like the most annoying, obnoxious, broken comp right now. And I'm still like, I'm telling you, these fights, I don't have a video for it because it was offline, but it was not even close, remotely close. It was ridiculously, like, that's the point I'm trying to make here. But a lot of times, if you don't reach this component, like if you don't have this many extra components, if we had the same level of components, this board would be significantly weaker, just because it wouldn't have the chutzpah in order to properly scale up the comp in an effective way. And that's usually what happens, or sometimes happens, with Golden Ox. The second win condition is 3 stars. You're going to have so much gold, and you're going to keep getting gold. You're actually incentivized to roll a lot of times. So either rolling on level 8 or level 9, you can actually go for 3-star 4 costs pretty efficiently. Especially in the current meta, a lot of people are hard forcing Vex and Zeri. We'll see how things work out in the next patch. But a lot of times, you have a lot of 4 cost outs, because you're playing a lot of 4 costs. You're playing 4 of them. It's likely that, especially late game, you're probably going to be able to roll for 1 of them. One of these 4 costs is going to be uncontested by the rest of your lobby. And at that point, you can just roll, stack up Golden Ox, and then scale yourself really efficiently into late game, because you'll just win out with a 3-star 4 cost. So this is the other situation. Of course, you don't necessarily need to do this. You could also win by just having a bunch of 5 costs and a bunch of items. But both of these situations require one thing, and that is the 6 Golden Ox scaling. 4 Golden Ox doesn't cut it. It's not enough gold to make it so that this is a reliable option. And 4 Golden Ox doesn't give you the chance of the components. So in order to keep your win conditions open and to properly scale this comp into late game and actually get your win out, you need to be playing 6 Golden Ox as early as possible, which I would recommend you would roll on stage 4, 4-1 or 4-2, get your 6 Golden Ox in, and then convert that into a win out. Now let's talk a little bit about early game. So early game, in particular, it could be good, it could be bad. There's a lot of different boards you can actually play into Golden Ox. You can either play it from like an AP opener if you're trying to play towards Annie and stabilize around the Annie items, but a lot of times mixed components works out really well. So you can play around like a Vigar opener, but typically the board that you see is something that looks a little bit like this. Now early game, you don't really care too much about like dedicating your whole board to Golden Ox, right? Only play Golden Ox units if they're worthwhile. So here, for example, Graves isn't that worthwhile, right? A better unit to play would be a Jarvan. This would be like a great opener for Golden Ox, because as long as you have Golden Ox in, you can start stacking the Golden Ox damage amp while you level just passively. Like, you don't have to roll for it every single turn, but you can start stacking it passively. Alistar is a really good Golden Ox unit, so a lot of times if you hit an Alistar 2-star, you're in a really good spot, because you're going to be really far ahead in your early game that you're going to be really rich and really healthy. It'll give you enough time to basically have the ability to stabilize your board, because the board is very expensive, so you have to be ramping up with Golden Ox, as well as have enough time to hit everybody 2-starred in order to fully stabilize your damage output and your sustained front line. So usually an opener like this is pretty good. Like I said, you don't have to have like 4 Golden Ox on stage 2. It does help, but you could just play it with like 2 Golden Ox, have it in, scale it up, and then in your mid game and late game you can transition into your 4 Golden Ox. Alistar is a really good holder of items, and is really good early game because of his passive damage reduction. He's just known to be like a really good reliable frontline unit. Here I'm just showing you like a Slayer Vayne type of board, because with Slayers especially, it works really nicely because you're usually playing around your Jarvan anyways. But Vayne also is a really good item holder of Aphelios items. The items that you usually would put on Aphelios are actually really good on Vayne as well, so she can actually hold on to those and stabilize you in your mid game to keep you into a good spot to transition into late game. Of course, what I would recommend is usually having the best possible opener for this in order to properly realize it and have like a good time playing it. I'll try and show you here. Give me 1 second. Boom. This is where I play Golden Ox, right? Like, I personally wouldn't play it without an emblem. So if you look at this opener, I'll show you what it is. It ended up being a prismatic lobby. This is Golden Ox crown. It gives me a Graves and a Golden Ox emblem, right? It also gives a Nashor's Tooth, which is okay on Graves in your early game, but I usually would transition it to Annie later in the game. But if you look at this spot, I have Alistar. It gives me, like, I just need to upgrade him. If I hit Alistar 2, it's high roll, and I high rolled the Alistar 2. I get the Golden Ox emblem, which I can put on my board, and then it also gives me a Graves. So that means I'm going to be 4 Golden Ox starting on stage 2, which means I can already start ramping up and playing super aggressively. Alistar is broken, Jarvan's broken. Jarvan might not be as broken in the future, maybe he's like not as good anymore, but they're mostly nerfing his damage output, so he's still going to be a pretty reliable tank. But Alistar is extremely strong in my early game. This is an amazing Golden Ox spot. Now, obviously, this is like, you know, it's very easy to say this is a Golden Ox spot, but I wouldn't be taking this emblem unless I had 4 Golden Ox here, right? Because I have this Jarvan and I have the Alistar pair. I was like, you know, high likelihood this guy's gonna get upgraded. I have a Jarvan, which is really good early game. I have a lot of confidence that I'll be able to save a lot of HP in this early game. And the HP is really important. You want a win streak and you want to kill units because it continues to stack gold that transitions you really well into late game. In this game especially, like, I ended up just like high rolling a lot. I took red buff, blue buff, so I have a champ dupe, so I just know that I'm playing for a 3-star unit. I also hit an Aphelios on stage 3, which was really, really high roll. But basically what ends up happening this game is that you can see that, like, you know, I pretty much win most of the rounds. I stabilize pretty efficiently on level, on stage 4 because I have a lot of HP and I have a lot of gold. Because I have so much gold from this game, it was like triple prismatic and I took some of the suggested prismatic, so I have a little bit of extra gold. As you can see, I hit Aurora early, I have the Golden Ox emblem, I have Aphelios 2, Leona 2. This puts me in an amazing spot to transition into my late game board, which I basically can just sit here. I don't necessarily win every single round, but this is what I mean by a good Golden Ox spot, because I already have like a pretty high stack of damage amp. As you can see, I'm not wasting my gold needlessly, right? I'm not just rolling for the sake of getting the number up because I'm stable. The number will rise naturally as we transition into our late game. So I'm greeting my econ. I'm trying to go level 9. I'm holding on to extra copies of the units that I want to play. And then eventually I just win out. This was from the picture that I showed you before. I eventually hit Xayah 3 because I have a champ duplicator as well. But a lot of this was warranted by me having the high HP and winning the early game rounds. It actually made me very rich, right? A lot of these rounds in this point in the game, I'm pushing levels, yes, but look, I'm level 7 on stage 3 with 30 gold. Because with 4 Golden Ox on stage 2, I farmed so much gold that I'm rich. I'm level 7 on 3. That allows me to have these higher odds of hitting the 4 costs, hitting the Aphelios, hitting the higher cost units, hitting the Jarvans, stabilizing my board. All of this comes from me being so strong in my early game, transitioning into the mid game. And then the extra HP that I have gives me the opportunity to slow roll late game into finding the Xayah. As you can see, I start to fall off late game. Even with this good of a Golden Ox spot, other boards start to cap out higher. Strategist Amp board starts to, or sorry, Strategist Street Demon board starts to win a lot of fights against me. Other boards like the Vex Executioner start to win fights against me, and I start to lose HP, right? I'm losing my HP lead. Other people are win streaking. There's a chance that I don't go, like, I have the HP lead, so I'm top 4 for sure, but there's a chance that I don't go first. But the reason that it worked out so well is because I gave myself enough time to hit Xayah 3, right? If I was 60 HP less, if I was playing this from a deficit, I didn't win streak all of stage 2 and most of stage 3, I would be dead by now, and I might have even ended up as a 5th because somebody just died the round prior. Because I started to lose every single round, not every single round, but I started to lose most rounds because my comp just didn't scale well, even though I have everybody upgraded. And a large part of that is that I don't have Xayah items. I even have Aurora 2 and I lost a round. You know what I mean? Like this comp is really a sum of its parts. So if you don't have all the parts moving, you can often lose a lot of rounds, especially against optimized boards. This board looks insane. I was still losing rounds to people, and they didn't have anything crazy. They just had, like, you know, regular boards that just were able to scale up pretty efficiently. But like I said, you just play towards one of the win cons. I have a lot of items. Once I have 3 item Viego 2, if I can find items for Xayah, here I prioritize Aurora items because I had the Aurora before I had the Xayah. So, you know, and then I have the duplicator, but even if I didn't have the duplicator, I'm leveraging my HP in order to hit the 3-star 4 cost and then win out from there. That's usually the tempo or the pace that a Golden Ox board goes. So that's all to say that you should just be aware that, like, even though it looks really flashy and really strong, just remember the stats I showed you, right? Really high win percentage, but only with 6 Golden Ox. 4 Golden Ox, a lot of times you're going 8th. So if you just low roll, if you don't hit your units, right, you roll down, you don't hit an Annie, you don't hit an Aphelios. If you're playing it from too far behind and you don't have the HP to survive long enough to hit these units, and you don't start cashing out your 6 Golden Ox, you're probably going to end up in this part of the ladder. And I just want to caution you guys. But like I said, very easy to win with. If you have a good spot for it, if you start the game off with a Jarvan and an Alistar, and you get a Graves and a Golden Ox emblem, 100% play Golden Ox, you'll win out. Trust me, it's broken. It's really good. But you just have to have a good opener for it. And that's what I always recommend. So this leads us really much into our conditions for success. A little bit longer video, but I was trying to supplement it with some extra visuals. But you want to be strong early. I personally would only play it with a spatula. If you do not have a spatula, then your board becomes really hard to stabilize, because basically instead of playing Aurora, or instead of having Xayah with the extra damage amp, you now have to play a random Graves, which is good for fucking nothing, and you need to find a Viego early. It makes this board really hard to get the 6 Golden Ox cash up, because even if you try and fast 9 with this board, you're going to be losing so many rounds of where you would otherwise be 6 Golden Ox. If you try and fast 9, kiss Aphelios 2, Annie 2, Leona 2 goodbye, you're not going to have enough gold to fast 9 and upgrade all of them unless you're like the highest of rollers. So like a lot of times if you try and play 6 Golden Ox without the emblem and you try and tempo and fast 9, you just bleed out, because by the time you hit 6 Golden Ox in, you don't scale it well enough to actually like get the cash outs, and you're stuck with all these 1-star trashes that don't do anything anyways because they're all 1-starred. So then you're just dead on the spot because you don't have enough gold to play this really expensive board but also hit everybody, but also fit in the 6 Golden Ox because you can't find the Viego. So what this does is stabilize you a lot better, because if you have the Golden Ox emblem, then you always can hit 6 Golden Ox. All you need to find is the Annie and the Aphelios. You can start getting your cash outs and then leverage that higher loot percentage chance and the components in order to give you another out and another way to steamroll everybody as a win condition. The two in conjunction is what makes it really strong, so you need to hit the 6 Golden Ox. Additionally, I would play with lots of early Golden Ox units. Obviously, that goes without saying. You can even play Golden Ox and pivot out of it into some other boards. I didn't really talk too much about pivot options, but as you can see, this board actually leans itself very nicely into either a strat amp board, which you can play around Annie if you have AP items, but it can also really easily just transition into a board, if you don't have an emblem, into like a Marksman Vanguard board to salvage placements. So if you play it and you're really high tempo and you actually have a really good opener, like let's say you have a Jarvan 2, you can actually pivot into some of these weaker options that still can cap very high, but I would recommend some of these options that can give you a little bit of a better option, that are maybe a little bit less expensive in order to stabilize. But what I'm saying is, like, you can pivot out of it, use these items towards something else. You can even pivot all the way to like a Zericom. You can also pivot to like a Slayer reroll angle if you have it. Like if on your way leveling up you find a lot of copies of Veins, you can just say, yeah, fuck it, I'll just play Vayne from here. So you have good options around there, but just be cognizant of those. Obviously, if you have early Golden Ox units, you can play them and then hope that you hit an emblem. And then if you hit the emblem, you can convert it and just say, okay, now I'm 100% playing 6 Golden Ox. But if you don't have an emblem, I would look for a pivot option, even if you have an early Golden Ox game. Additionally, you want to have good econ, relatively be ahead of the lobby, just because like if you're the person dictating the pace of the lobby, it works really well with this comp because you can basically win out for free and have a lot of aggressive, like, how do I phrase it? You can pressure other people into having to roll and play more aggressively because you have win conditions that they have to now try and deny, which then benefits you because they're hurting their max cap by trying to deny you your win conditions. So you want to be the one dictating the pace a lot of time. You also want to be uncontested. You're playing a lot of 4 costs on your board, and they all need to be upgraded a lot of the time in order to be stable. So you got to be very careful about that. Additionally, tempo augments can help out a lot. If you have augments, you should always be picking augments that make you stronger now. You should look at an augment and say to yourself, does this make me stronger now? When you're playing a cash out style trait like this, you want to be as strong as possible in your early so that you have as much time later to hit that next stabilization point that is very expensive. Huge win out potential, but give yourself the best odds of reaching that critical mass point. That's what I would recommend. So just be careful about that and try your best, of course. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe. It does help me out. Only other notes that I would say is that I think like sometimes like maybe Annie in the next patch is getting good buffs. If you're playing Annie, I recommend not necessarily 6 Golden Ox because it doesn't really clash well with her trait. I think she's getting buffs on the amp side of things in particular. So like amp might work out better if your primary Annie carry is what I would say, and that's like playing like Nefiri and Samira. So that can be another option. But of course, I'm just trying to future-proof this video a little bit. Either way, have fun out there. This comp is very good. I recommend playing it as much as you can, but obviously when I say that, make sure that you have a good spot at the start. That's like the main takeaway from this video. It's very risky. If you don't have a good golden ox spot, you will fizzle out and die out very fast, and you will just go 8th. It has a very high 8th potential if you don't hit your key stabilization points. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and see ya. Bye bye.